Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast today. I'm here with Jessi Campbell. She is the founder of Hi, Jessi. She's the founder of Into the Mystic, and she is a mystic healer and artist. She's located in Ojai, California. Hi, Jessi.
Hi, Shannon.
Thank you for being here. I'm going to let you kind of tell. Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to let you tell everybody a little bit about what you do and what it means to be a mystic healer and an artist and all the things you do.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a big question, but I'll do my best to encompass. What I do. So I am a Reiki master and energy worker. And what I do is I use different mediums, different pathways, including Reiki and energy work, to lead people into the liminal spaces, into the liminal realm. And maybe I should pause and kind of define liminal for a second, because I'm familiar with that word, but I love that word. I love the way it sounds. So the liminal really means in between, the space in between here and there, this world and that world, asleep and awake, you and me, this threshold. And I find it to be just this magical, sacred place where really anything can happen, because it's in the imaginal realm. So anything can happen in this space. And so I lead people into this space and support them in exploring this space to really create and strengthen and build relationships to their own inner resource, this infinite resource within, as well as to their unseen guides, their unseen spirit helpers. And really, I like to call this work reclamation work. Because we're in these spaces, we can remember lost parts of ourselves, senses, sensitivities, abilities, and really restore those relationships, restore that relationship with self, that inner resource, restore that in that relationship with the unseen world. And through that, really ultimately gaining a deep sense of trust for yourself, for life itself, like the journey of life, the intelligence of life, the beautiful spirit of life, that we can trust and lean into, that it is always guiding us. And really, with that reclamation, really, I think becomes kind of like a restoration, all these words, remembrance, reclamation, of balance, and really like a wholeness. And I always say like wholeness, holiness. Yeah. Like those words are so connected, which I believe is our true nature. So that's kind of what I do. Mm-hmm.
Wow. I'm so excited to get into this and unpack this and explain and just go deeper into all of this stuff. So thank you for explaining that. I'd love to go a little bit backwards and just kind of talk about where you were born and give us like a snapshot of how you grew up.
Sure. So I grew up outside of Kansas City, Kansas, Midwest girl.
Oh, me too. I'm from Michigan, Midwest.
Right. And I grew up, kind of in the suburbs. And I guess what always kind of sticks out, there's a few things that always stick out about my childhood. And one of which is that we had a creek on the other side of the fence in our backyard, is chain link fence. So a lot of times I feel like a lot of my childhood was spent over that fence, on the other side of that fence, playing in the creek, looking at tadpoles, making forts. And when I wasn't in the creek, I was in the backyard, maybe like smashing up acorns and, making potions. And so there's this, I feel like I spent a lot of my childhood in like make-believe, in those imaginal realms. It was kind of my favorite place to be, like pretending to be different animals. And so spending time in nature as well as in those imaginal spaces, and just like a real strong sense of play and curiosity.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's so wonderful. Yeah, that's that connecting thread of that liminal space. It's something you've kind of been doing your whole life, is kind of spending time in that state of that in-between state of awareness where you're really probably kind of channeling and connecting.
Yeah.
Very, very beautiful. And so when we had spoken earlier, we had talked about kind of one of the most significant events of your childhood, and that was your grandmother dying. Would you talk a little bit about that, please?
Sure. Yeah. My grandmother, my dad's mother, Carol, died when I was 12. And she had kind of had a long battle with cancer. And, I'm remembering these things from my 12-year-old memory, right? So
sure,
through his particular lens. But I feel my 12-year-old memory anyway feels that like a lot of that was kind of kept from me, and maybe part of that was me too, like not wanting to see or not wanting to know. But I think our culture generally, Western culture, wants to protect children from illness and death and all of those things. And so I think I was pretty shielded from a lot of that process, from her illness and also from her dying process and from her death. And I think at 12 years old, that was when she died, that was when I first realized that I myself was going to die. And that really just like terrified me, like the in your bones, like kind of blood freezing kind of terror. And a lot of nights I remember kind of going to sleep with that, kind of looking out this little window in my bedroom up at the sky and just being really scared, terrified, and not knowing how to talk about it. I don't think I talked about it with anyone. I don't think I talked about it with my parents, because I think that I just felt like we weren't supposed to talk about it. Like it wasn't something that we talked about.
People don't really talk about death in this culture, or maybe they do, but I think it's very uncomfortable. I find myself tiptoeing, not really sure what to say. And as much as I want to support and love, I don't feel that I know what to do. And so I just feel a little uncomfortable.
Sure. Yeah. And I imagine my parents did too. I don't have any little ones, but I imagine great difficulty there is in talking to children about death. And so that really kind of, was just always kind of there, and I've been doing so much inner work, so much healing work, especially over this last year, I think, as we all have so much shedding. And that was one, that real inner child wound was something that I hadn't really faced or worked with. And I think what is ultimately what led me to this Death Mid-Wifery path.
I would love for you to talk more about that. If you could just even talk about what it is. And I mean, when we had talked about it earlier, I was so fascinated. I think it's such beautiful work and such a wonderful conversation to open, because I think that there are a lot of feelings and questions and uncomfortable things around death and grief and wanting to do the right things, but not knowing what they are, and worried you're doing the wrong things and you're not supporting people properly. So I would love for you to talk about that all of it, and, even your journey with it, and such a beautiful conversation.
Yeah, I'd love to. So Death Mid-Wifery, as I've been taught, is a good large umbrella, covers a lot. And we talk about death midwifery in the same way that we talk about birth midwifery. It's this midwife or kind of guide support through this epic rite of passage, right? Birth and death being, I think, the ultimate rites of passage in life. These portals, to the other side.
Yeah.
And I've actually heard, I would really like to search for a conversation between a death midwife and a birth midwife. I've made a note to do that. But just in certain things that I've heard people talk about, they say that it's very similar. Like those portals are very, very similar, which I think makes a lot of sense. And I think that the reason why, we don't have these death midwives, even though we used to, is just like what we were talking about, that death has been so pushed out of our culture, pushed out of our minds, like so many things, right? Like the feminine, like I could go on and on. So I think it's all very similar. This division we've made within ourselves and said, this is good and this is right and these are bad and this is wrong. And I feel like we're walking around as these kind of half people. Yeah. So the death midwife really often comes on from a diagnosis. So helping a person through their dying process, consciously, helping them consciously die. A lot of different things, right? It means helping them with all the logistics, all the paperwork, all the things, so that you're not. So many people don't want to face death and talk about death, so that there's all this work that needs to be done when they die that falls on the families. Yeah, and often. Sometimes they become incapacitated, and so these huge decisions are put on the families to decide, and that's a big responsibility, a big weight. So a lot of this work is really encouraging us to, really at any age, to think about our death, and not just in a morbid way, but like in a creative way, in a beautiful way. What do I want to? Who do I want to be there with me? What do I want to be read to me? What do I want at my bedside? Really creating an intentional death. It's something that's been taken away from us, and put into the hands of professionals and really an industry. Yeah. And so helping people through that conscious dying process, paperwork, things like that, but also supporting the emotional process, spiritual process of kind of disentanglement, starting to detach, ourselves from our worldly attachments, and to make any kind of repairs, relational repairs, just helping ease and soften and comfort the experience. That's
so healing. That sets so much healing in motion before sort of all the healing that comes that's associated with the actual death. But I guess it sets all the healing in motion so that people have a voice, and like you're saying, even healing some of those relational things between people. It's like you have a voice while the person is still able to communicate in this realm. And that's really healing. I mean, that sets a beautiful process in motion in advance.
And I think it's, again, to use this word empowering, I think it's a really empowering process, that you get to leave the way that you want to, which I really feel like I said, has been taken away. And I want to help. Like my activism, I feel like is wanting to give that back to people, and it can be so beautiful, and reminding people that it can be so beautiful. It can be such a beautiful experience for not just yourself, but also for your loved ones to witness. And when you can die consciously and beautifully in that way, then you are making death easier for everyone around you when it's time for their time, you know? So it's this beautiful rippling effect. So for the death midwife, and I think that's often kind of maybe the distinction between death doula and death midwife, from what I've been taught, is that a death doula is for that dying process. And then the death midwife oversees that, but also what happens after death. And creating beautiful rituals around taking care of the body, of bathing the body, of anointing the body. And my teacher is also a home funeral guide, so learning about home funerals and 3-day vigils and these really beautiful, sacred, healing ways of taking care of the body. Respecting this, you know, oftentimes when people die, it's like an emergency, you know, it's like you call, you know, the powers that be, they're taken away. And before you know it, you've had no time to somatically process what has happened. Mm-hmm. Whereas a very short time ago, you know, 100 years ago, people were still dying in our parlors, you know, and they stayed with us, and we had that kind of connection for the body and the heart to catch up to what is happening, to help that grieving process. And that's actually just kind of a little fun fact, is that when the funeral industry started to arise, that's when they took over the name parlor, and then our parlors within our home were then renamed the living room, because now these rooms were for the living. And I was like, whoa, that kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
This is, again, like there's all of these back to the land movements, all of these kind of returning to these empowered ways of life where we're so connected, you know, and things are sacred and things are reverent. And this is what this, I think, death movement is about returning and remembering what it is to embrace death into life, and how much that illuminates life and inspires life. It's not morbid. It's really incredible how much it just illuminates the heart and illuminates compassion and enthusiasm and love for life when we can bring death back into the fold. So yeah, the death midwife kind of oversees the dying process, and then this kind of sacred time after death, this quiet, sacred, special time, that creating something with the family, a healing ritual with the family, with the body. And these home funerals are so beautiful. They're so beautiful because they're so intimate, and it's not this, strangers aren't involved, and they don't have to be. And that's another big part of the work I want to do, is people just don't know their rights, because we're being told, we're so in the systems, and the industries don't want us to know what our rights are, so they can continue to have the power. And it's also a very expensive process. And so, I really want education about what currently happens when people die.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about that. What do you mean? I didn't even really know that. You're saying so many things, and I'm trying to process it as you're saying it, and I'm really fascinated. So you're saying, like, from diagnosis, and does that just mean you could be diagnosed with an illness, or does that also just mean maybe you're 90 and your family is feeling like you may be passing in the next year or two, and they would like to start having this process together as a family? So diagnosis can just mean any time along the process that you feel like your life may be coming to an end. Yeah. And this is something that it's because it's very, what I really like about it is involvement in a positive, beautiful way. Because my experience with death has been either I don't know that it's happening or going to happen, or it's secretive, or I don't know how to be involved because it's uncomfortable. So I love that you're saying bringing somebody together and bringing families and people together in this way to connect. But also, I've never known about a home funeral. I didn't even know. So for a lot of what you're saying, I'm thinking, I bet you people don't even know what's possible or that this is available. Of course, there are home births, and that's quite natural. And, I know people that have had the most amazing experiences with them, but I've never heard of a home funeral. And what types of things do you do with the body after it's left the spirit?
Yeah. So it's a lot of information. So I won't go into like details and things like
Sure.
that. But I do, for an example, one thing that happens when the bodies are whisked away we embalm our dead, which is not, you don't have to be involved. Most people
I didn't know that.
There will be pushback. They will tell you, oh, you don't want to see the body if it's not embalmed. And let me tell you and assure you, I have not been physically present, but I have seen so many beautiful photos, videos of these home funerals, and it is not, they look beautiful, they look peaceful. And the embalming process is a pretty gruesome process, is a pretty invasive process. And I won't get
Sure. No, it's okay. Yeah, of course.
That is why people look so kind of strange when they've been embalmed. It like looks like them, but it also doesn't look like them.
Mm-hmm.
It's an incredibly toxic process, like toxic formaldehyde. All these very toxic chemicals are being used. And really just for the presentation of the body. But like I said, you don't have to do that. And I think we're so, our culture has all this. Another reason why our culture has so much fear around death is because of all the entertainment and movies and horror. It's like it's going to be scary and gory. And no, again, like just very recently have we kind of broken the relationship with our dead, and so it's not, so that's number one, just knowing that you don't need to be embalmed, that your loved one doesn't have to go through this super invasive process. And you can bring the body home. And again, this is very, there's a lot of red tape and hoops to jump through because, and I don't want to get too hung up on that. If anybody has any questions, anyone can always reach out to me. I'm happy to talk.
Sure.
But it is possible to bring the body home and to have a midwife there to help you through the process of bathing this body, and saying goodbye. And it's this somatic, I read once that like our ancient ancestors, like when they were first kind of finding when they were first kind of starting to find evidence of like burials, these like our Neolithic or Paleolithic ancestors would put rocks on top of the dead, burying the dead with these rocks. And it is this somaticized movement of being with the physical dead body of our loved one and having a ritual and a somatic ritual that again helps the body and the heart and the mind catch up to what is happening. So that usually on the third day of having a vigil like that, then you're ready to let the body go, as opposed to it being whisked away. You're not a part of that process. There's a very invasive process that happens with strangers. The body is all of a sudden brought back to you in this huge, enormous, expensive casket. They look kind of weird. They have makeup on. And then it's very formal. You're all dressed up and it's a very short amount of time in which you have to interact. And then it's over. And then that is that is what you leave with, as opposed to this beautiful ritual where you can grieve, and it's the saying goodbye to this body, this vessel of your loved one.
That is so gorgeous. It's really beautiful. When I do past life sessions with people, one of the things is that the last the last thought on your mind that you leave with is sort of tends to kind of come in to the next life. If you believe in reincarnation, come into the next life. And that tends to be like a theme, one of the themes that your life runs on. So it's really, I love what you're saying. It's not only special, but it's healing not only for this lifetime, but for, like you're saying, that ripple effect that can ripple out into your future lives. And it can also ripple out into this life and all the future lives of the generations that are around you. Yeah. So it's really, the layers of healing are so deep, and that's so widespread just from this, beautiful act of grace, really.
Such a perfect word for that. Yeah.
Wow. That is really fascinating work.
It's big work. It's big work.
It really is. And so do you work in tandem with a death doula? It sounds like, in my head when I think about it, I think almost like a team in a way, a doula, and then somebody maybe communicating with the spirit after it's passed, if there's anything that needs to be wrapped up. So it's almost like a team of people that could really help you to integrate and heal that, so that, I guess it doesn't, I don't know, I guess would it change if it doesn't really, quote unquote, change the grief process, but helps you to integrate the grief, I suppose, into your life?
Yeah. I think it does change the grief process. P.S. I really do. Feedback that I've heard from people who've experienced home funerals, and especially this can happen for mamas and their babies. This is not just for, you imagine our dead is usually as old people, but for mamas and their babies, if they have a stillborn or a young one, like it's so, to hear the feedback of people who have gotten to have these experiences is profound, like profoundly healing for them. To really feel ready to let go, as opposed to, this kind of cut and it's out, and there's this somatic, again, it just comes back to the body. I think that it takes the body some time to understand. I do think it changes the grief process, if I may be so bold as to say.
If the body isn't present, let's say that somebody met you after they had already had a death and the body wasn't present, would it still be possible to do a ritual or some kind of ceremony to get that closure? And does it have to be in person? I'm just so curious in general, because now looking back, you think, gosh, there have been experiences where maybe, that would really help change the way that my body and my mind have processed a death.
Yeah, absolutely, Shannon. And someone brought up in my class, a really tragic event. And 20 years ago, I believe it was their cousin was murdered, very tragically, obviously. And it's still with her, and obviously too, it's still very much with her, but mostly because she didn't get to have that kind of closure, didn't get to care for the body in that way, because she didn't know, like most people don't know that that's possible.
Right.
So Olivia, my teacher, had suggested so beautifully that yes, that can still happen. You ask someone to be a body, or you can pretend, but you could absolutely create some kind of ritual in which you can cleanse and purify and wrap and kind of shroud and have music and flower petals. You can create this. You can create this beautiful. You can make beauty out of it, which even just the suggestion of this from Olivia to this woman, tears started to pour, because she could feel how healing, just the idea of it
Yeah, that release.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's a great question.
Wow.
And I thought, and after hearing that, I was like, oh, I need to do that for my grandma, you know? Because what wasn't such another powerful video that we watched was, and I was so surprised and shocked by my reaction. We watched this, maybe she was like, maybe she was more like 8 or 9 years old, I'm not sure. But this little girl with her dead grandpa in the house. And at first she didn't want to go in and to the room and see him because she was scared, and because no one was really talking about it, his dying and death process. But then when she got up the nerve, it was just this beautiful, and the video it just made me think, oh, that's like I could see my little girl, like my little person, and feeling so sad that I didn't get to have that with my grandma, you know, like make her out and create such beauty around her. And she wasn't afraid. She would just, you know, put her whole little head and pet her grandpa and cry and hug and poke and be curious too, like poke me, you know. It's this children. It's something that I hear over and over again from people who do this work, is that children really are like the angels in these situations, because when they're young, they're unafraid because they don't have, there's no need. They learn to be afraid. They learn to be afraid.
Yes.
And death and sickness tend to be afraid. They're watching us and our reactions. So, but naturally, when they're young enough, naturally before they've been taught, they're highly curious and full of wonder, and it's beautiful, and they can bring such beauty and their creative spirit. So yeah. Anyway, I thought after I saw that video, I was like, I feel like I need to have that with my grandma. You know, be able to.
That would be beautiful for you to do your own ritual for your inner child to really heal that experience.
Yeah.
And how it's so interesting that you've been drawn to this work, and maybe partly because of your experience there, but also how that's really, you know, you being drawn to this work is really helping you to get deeply in touch with that inner child piece of yourself that really wants to heal that for yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I wanted to, what you had said earlier too about, I wanted to address your question about the team. And absolutely, like people do this work on their own, and I think that's just kind of mind-blowing because it's such huge work. But I imagine I would like to create a team here in Ojai where we all have kind of we're all capable of doing all of the things, but we all kind of have our little niche within that wheel. You know, some people are good at that logistical stuff, the paperwork and stuff like that.
Sure.
Making the phone calls and like doing all of those things. And some people are really good at holding emotional space and have like a really large capacity for that. And I also am a music maker, and I would love to bring song and music into it. And of
that's
course,
gorgeous.
Energy worker and all of that. There's all sorts of things that can be done for the dying, as well as the spirit after the body dies, for the family. There's just it's like I said, it's a big umbrella. There's a lot that occurs, and so yeah, a team of people would be wonderful, because it's a big responsibility too. And you're on call just like a birth midwife, you know. So to have a team, it's the way to do it these days. We're bringing no more lone wolves, right? We're bringing the
team. Yeah. Well, everybody has their specialty, and you know, what I really hear you saying is there's so much more around this topic than we even really probably have time to discuss today, which is so fascinating because it's layers and layers and layers, not only on the physical level, the emotional level, the spiritual level. I hear you saying kind of like that underworld level. Like there's just multi-dimensional layers, including real-time logistical things that also need to happen in the physical world, but also a whole bunch of stuff in the liminal space, the energetic and the spiritual realm. So yeah, that's definitely a lot for one person. I love the idea of a team, and I'm so grateful that I've met you and that you've even brought this to awareness, because I didn't really know this was possible, and I do think that this could really change things, and it's very beautiful to open this discussion for sure.
Yeah,
I love it. So I'd also love to talk more about your reclamation work, kind of that relationship to yourself and that unlimited resource within you, and how you work with people in that way.
Yeah. Let's see, what do I want to say about that? Just like, so I'm still kind of like shifting gears from.
That's okay. We can also go back to that. If you have anything that you'd like to add, or you want to continue to talk about that, I honestly think that this idea of talking about, death and death midwifery, and just even the idea of creating a ritual around death in a way that I've never seen done before, and making it in a way where people have choices.
Yeah.
Because you're right, it does often feel like there's no choice. This is the way people do it, and this is the way it has to be done. So this is the way I'll do it too. And it's beautiful to think there's a choice. I was also thinking about, as people near the end of their life, even just from old age, and they're not ill, but the beauty of bringing a family together in that way, and just starting those conversations, even because they say that so much healing happens around death, when the spirit kind of leaves the body and kind of hangs around the dimensional planes to offer healing to their loved ones. But, sometimes there are those relational issues in families that they're not really able to receive that healing that's available for them. So it leads me to believe that this type of setup could really get them to that place before it's quote unquote too late, because often people think of death as an end, as opposed to a different beginning, or a different portal, or a different type of communication.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, who knows what happens? It's the great mystery, but a lot of people believe that it will happen at your moment of death, whether you are conscious of it or not. These things are released, but why not try to have a more conscious experience of it? Why not try to be as present in and I touch, because I'm like embodied as and present as possible throughout the process. Yeah, I guess again, it's no wonder that this is also the work that I'm moving into, because it doesn't get really any more liminal than that. That threshold between this world and that world. And again, that's just, I just feel like that's been the common thread in my life. Yeah, just spending so much time in that imaginal space in childhood, and then being dance was my first love, being a dancer, and then acting and theater and music, a lot of these performance arts, which I think, for me, in my experience, I think that maybe it's not this way for everybody, but for me, the performance state is also being in that liminal space, which I just I've always been so enchanted by. I just always wanted to be in. And yeah, so then when this healing work found me, when Reiki and energy work found me, it was just, people were kind of maybe confused about how, they're like, really? Like I did all these, but for me, the connection is so, again, it's just working in those liminal spaces. And also I feel like, all of those things that I mentioned that I've done are about like deep listening, and listening in like a full sensory type way, you know, and having an incredible amount of presence, learning how to be really present, is really required, I think, to be proficient in any of those things that I've mentioned. Really, just for life, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, this work that I do and have been doing, you know, I was doing Reiki and energy work and calling it that for a long time, and it still is that. But only recently have I kind of stepped back and started to think about the greater intention of what I really feel like the Reiki and the energy work are like. You know, I think we talked about this in our initial conversation, but I really feel like what I'm doing in these sessions is I'm almost like the weatherman, the weather woman, or like the conductor of energy, electricity, but also the conductor of this kind of orchestra, like creating the kind of optimal circumstances, this kind of optimal weather for you to have this experience. So the Reiki and the energy work, you know, you're getting a Reiki and energy work session, meaning your energy bodies are getting cleared and cleaned and balanced, and you're getting connected to this sacred space where you can have incredible experiences, incredible first-hand experiences. And I guess that's why I think, why I call this reclamation work, is that it's one thing to believe something or intellectually understand something, and to even have these experiences through or have the understanding through other people's experiences, right? These specialists, even in the spiritual realms, these gurus, right? They're having the experience. I'm learning about their experience through my intellect, yeah. But to give people back this firsthand experience of the mystery, which is our birthright. You know, it is absolutely our birthright. Everyone is capable of having this experience. It might just take some time. There's many things that have been kind of stacked up around us. You know, sometimes I talk about it as like it's a frequency, right? Like a radio station, you know, it's like it gets some static for a while before you kind of find the right spot. But once you do, it is limitless, truly limitless. And what I've experienced, the healing that I've experienced, and the beautiful, and all kinds of different healing, like ancestral healing and inner child, like there's no kind of limitation to the healing that can occur in this space, and the spontaneous healing that can occur in these spaces. It always blows my mind. It's always different. And I'm just I'm so lucky, you know, I'm just so lucky because I think in theater and music, while I loved it and I was channeling, right? I think that's also the common kind of thread there is it's all kind of channeling work, channeling energy of some kind. No, I lost my train of thought now that I went into the whole. I was like, channeling.
Yeah, you were saying in theater and in performance that, you know, that was another common thread, that you're always channeling that energy.
Yeah, I forget where I was at before that, though. Oh,
well. It happens.
Yeah.
It'll come back around. Yeah. I mean, I love what you're talking about, because it's so clear to me when I'm speaking with you in this experience right now. You are so deeply present, and it really is. It's not a blurry space, but it's almost like that kind of space where like you soften your eyes a little bit and you can almost see a little bit better. Yeah. And so I can really feel that when I'm with you. And it's such a gift, because I can also feel in the background, there is a lot of energy moving and there is a lot of clearing. And I think you're just doing that, you know, with your presence, you know, of course, also your attunement and frequency, but also I think it's that presence. And so because of my sensitivity and my presence, I definitely have an awareness that it's like a river moving in the background, and it's very interesting. So it's really lovely to feel you hold space, because I can feel you doing all the things that you're talking about doing, it's just sort of, running in the background as we're having this conversation. So it's really, really beautiful to feel it as well. What kind of music do you make? I keep looking at your hands as you're speaking, and I keep thinking you have piano fingers, or you have like very beautiful hands.
I've always been told I have my grandmother's hands too. The specific Carol, my grandma that I was talking about. I have
of course.
And I can like dabble on the piano. I was a drummer in the band that I was in for a long time, and a kit drummer. I can make my way on a guitar, very kind of like foundational, like very simple. But singing is my love, and harmonizing. So I'd love to create, some singing. Like Olivia, my teacher who I was telling you about, has like a sacred singing group, that comes bedside, to do the sacred bathing rituals and things like that. And I'm like, yes, like. So that's another kind of like team of people I kind of want to create.
It's a beautiful layer. And, it is also such a part of who you are. It's so interesting to me how each part of this experience of Death Mid-Wifery is such a deep part of who you are, but also kind of, it sounds like who you've always been. And just on a side note, the entire podcast, I've been noticing your hands. I noticed them right away when we started talking. And it's so funny you said they're your grandmother's hands. I'm like, she's probably here. That's probably her way of saying like, hi, I'm in the room with you right now, because I've just been noticing them the entire time and thinking how beautiful they are.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm great. There's this incredible woman who I actually think in our original conversation, I can't think of her name, and I couldn't then either, but maybe it's something we can put in notes later or something. But she's a wonderful elder, and she reads your palms, but not in the original like more palmistry way, but like she'll read your fingerprints also. But when I opened up my hands to show her, she was like, wow. She's like, you have fire hands. And I'm like, yeah, of course. Because everything astrologically, Ayurvedic, I'm all fire. I'm like on fire. I don't know if you can, you can't really, but there's all these, I have like zillions of like tiny lines in my hands, which I guess is like the marker for these fire hands. But I do remember when I was a little person, and I can see the exact, there was snow on the ground. That was the backdrop. And I remember very distinctly looking down at my hands and being like, I know my hands have healing powers. Like my hands can heal. And wow. I think I remember like trying out and doing some things after that. But this was like a memory that kind of came back into my brain more as an adult. But yeah, my hands, my healing hands.
Yeah, you too. I've definitely been noticing them. And that's what you were talking about, that when we talked about it earlier before we did the podcast, is that radiating energy and that dragon energy and that.
Yeah. So the same woman, I feel so terrible. I can't think of her name.
When you think of it, we'll just add it to the show notes for everybody. Yes. So
Wheat Medicine.
Yeah. Oh, what's it called?
Wheat Medicine is her name. And she goes
Medicine?
Yeah, and she also goes by Sweetie. People fondly call her Sweetie, Sweet Medicine.
Okay, I'll definitely add it to the show notes if anybody would like to find her.
Just a wonderful, wonderful spirit. But yeah, after she read my palms, well, first she was like, it must be very difficult for you. And I'm like, yeah, because it's just so much fire. It's very hard to wield because it can be very destructive, it can be very destructive energy. It can feel very wild and out of control because it's just a lot of energy. And she encouraged me, and I think about this so often, she encouraged me to not think about my fire as like this, as like fire as in like in a destructive form, like as a forest fire or something kind of wild and out of control. And even fire, like in a fireplace, like not to think of it as that kind of fire, but to think of it more as like the sun. Like think of your fire more as like the sun. So you are just this kind of source that is radiating energy that allows people to feel like shined upon, and like warmth, and it's softened, like think about yourself when you lay in the sun. Like it's one of my favorite things to do. It's so disarming, and you kind of melt and you open and you soften, and it's this like life-giving source, literally the sun. And so that was so helpful to reimagine what my fire can be and what my fire is capable of. So that's literally what I feel like I'm doing in these sessions is well, and even as I'm sitting here talking with you, yeah, it's just like, is like radiating this radiating energy. So that's been very helpful distinction, like a perspective shift for me with my medicine, with my fire medicine. So yeah, it's a wonderful
vision. Yeah, it's a great way to reframe that, because you do have that. To me, when I speak to you, you have sort of this grounded presence that feels so drilled into the earth that you somehow, it feels to me this dichotomy of this fire, but this very calm, like strong ground. So you've somehow managed to, I'm not going to say the word contain, but somehow have those two living side by side, but feeling very strong and calm.
Thank you, Shannon. It's taken a lot of work. Yeah, maybe the word is like capacity. Yeah, that's the word.
Capacity. Yeah. Capacity
to allow for, to allow it for it to come forth. Yeah, it's been quite a process, and the groundedness is a pretty recent. I feel like that capacity and that groundedness is fairly recent in my life. It takes a lot of work, a lot of trust.
Yeah, that really leads me right into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which are your natural gifts. And we had talked about this before, and sort of one of your number ones were trust and patience. I had actually thought it was patience, but you had kind of said it's actually trust. So trust, and just kind of that, is it that deep knowing and that trust in yourself, that trust? How does that come through for you?
Well, I mean, the trust, I practice what I preach, like I do this work because I've done this work. Spending all this time, intentional time in these liminal spaces, just like any relationship, you start to build trust. You start to build trust. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes you showing up. And so the more I do this work, and the more I hit a new kind of like point of like, where I start to get like a little scared. I keep doing what I know how to do. I keep just spending time in that space and keep softening and allowing and trusting and surrendering. Something that's coming to my mind, I used to sit in tea meditation a lot. And one of the most beautiful messages I got once, I was having a very difficult time. This was a very challenging time for me at that time. And I just didn't understand. I just like wanted to have some comfort. I wanted to have like someone just like tell me it's going to be okay. You know, I just felt so out in it and kind of alone. And I was told, like, Spirit came and was like, it's like this. You're not alone. It's like this. Remember when we were kids and you're in the swimming pool with your mom and you got your little, you know, you're taking your little floaties off and you're kind of just like hovering around in the shallow end, and mom is out in the deep end, and mom's just like, come on, you can do it. And you're just like, oh, and you kind of like paddle and you're like, oh God, but she's just like, come on, you can do it. You know, her arms are open. And then you have that moment, right, where you finally do it. And then she grabs you and she holds you. And then, but like Spirit or whatever you want to call it, is constantly doing that to us. You know, as soon as we get that moment of like arriving, she moves again, because that deep end is infinite. It is truly infinite. It's just like, come on. And so you start to build that trust for mom, you know, for mom.
Yeah, quote unquote mom. Gosh,
she's not leaving. She's not leaving you. She's not leaving you. It's just, this is how we grow. This is how we stretch. This is how you learn. Like, you gotta feel like you're doing some of this on your own, you know? And, so yeah, trust.
Yeah. What I love about your natural gifts, which we talked about being trust, sensitivity, imagination, and that fire. I also added channeling to that because I really feel like what's so fascinating to me about that is how directly related they are to the common thread of the liminal space, because all of those gifts really exist within that liminal space. And that's really, you know, you're accessing them all the time, but I think like you're channeling all those things in that liminal space. So it's like that liminal space, I think, is sort of kind of, you know, in a way, sort of this beautiful container for you to channel all of these things to come through, which is my guess is why you're doing your most, you know, your life's work in that space, because that's where you're channeling. And so, I mean, it's so beautiful that you've learned how to connect with this space and this state of awareness so that you can really channel all of your gifts. And it's really inspiring because I think it kind of shows other people that maybe all the things we know how to do aren't always in this sort of like quote unquote conscious realm or the seen realm. So many of the things that we're doing are in these unseen realms or these places that, you know, there are other ways that we can be channeling our gifts. I just love that about you. I think it's so beautiful and so inspiring.
Thank you, Shannon. Yeah, it really does feel like a culmination, of all, and also like just of all the different things, all my different loves, all my different passions that I've left, you know, that I've been like, oh, this isn't quite right, you know, and I go on to something else and this isn't quite right. But it feels like the whole time I just kept telling myself, no, I'm just like cooking something. These are just like all the different ingredients, you know, I'm like I sometimes say like I put myself through my own mystery school, you know, like learning all these different things.
I love that.
And this really does feel like the culmination of those different ingredients. So
it's funny you're making that movement. You're making that movement of soup, because in my head I was like, yeah, it's like fire soup. And then all of a sudden you started making the move. I really feel like we're in that liminal space together, because I keep thinking something and then you'll do it. And I'm like, okay, of course she did that. Could you please tell everybody where they can find you if they'd like to work with you or if they have any questions about the work you're doing?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. So I have a new website coming shortly by the end of the month, I believe. But that website is intothemysticarts.com. And then you can find me right now on Instagram at intothemystic.arts. I'm so happy to to be a resource. I also have, I offer what I call free exploration calls. So anyone who is interested in this work or wanting to know, is this for me? I don't know, or just has questions or just wants to talk about it. It's my favorite thing to talk about. So you can schedule a free call. And I offer distance work and in-person sessions in LA and in Ojai. I still definitely consider myself a student of Death Mid-Wifery. I'm not sure if I'm ready to really take on someone, but as the universe always, it just delivers when it's ready. So I'll take it when it comes. But yeah, if you have any questions, you are hungry for more, I'm happy to answer what I know or lead you to people that do a lot of good resources. So please reach out. Happy to talk to anybody. So
that's so wonderful. Thank you so much for.
And I'm also just want to say that I'm also offering group healing sessions. So this is like another form of the distance work at a discount because I really want this work to be accessible for everybody. So that I also offer this group distance work. Just to throw that out there too.
Okay, and people can find that linked from your Instagram.
A monthly session. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So I just have 2 final questions for you before we wrap things up, and that is, what inspires you and what keeps you growing?
I have these beautiful chimes ringing right now. I don't know if you can hear them. What inspires me?
Oh, I can hear them.
So everything. Everything. Life itself. The life journey inspires me. Beginning to end. Yeah. Possibility. Inspires me. This journey, this art, this creation, this piece. And then what was the second?
What keeps you growing?
Curiosity, wonder, passion.
Very beautiful. So very beautiful. Thank you for sharing so much knowledge and so much of yourself. It's really been a pleasure to sit here with you today. And I also feel like I had this beautiful energy session just sitting here with you. So I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for having me, for having this discussion with me, for being a beautiful light that you are, and for all that you do and bring. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.